Okay, so we are live. We are live, and I see some folks in the comments. Tim was in here first. We've got Boozer says Craig's almost never late. Okay, so we've got a special guest coming on, BritishHODL, and he is trying to sign in to StreamYard as we speak. So when he comes in, I'll bring him up. But in the meantime, we'll go through what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be talking about watches. He's a big watch guy. And of course, we're also going to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff. American Patriot 86 from Switzerland is in the house. And so hopefully he'll be here soon. I did get a message from him on Twitter that he is in the process of signing on. I've got up on the screen right now his YouTube channel. If you're not subscribing to that, I don't know what you're thinking. Do that right away. And you see tickering there at BritishHODL. And then you'll see some other handles there of folks that you definitely want to follow. So speaking of BritishHODL, he's here. Let's bring him up and see what his audio sounds like. Definitely want to follow. So, okay, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you. Bring him up and British. How's your audio?
Hold on, give me one second. There we go. Right. Apologies, Craig. Firstly, accept my apologies for being late.
No worries. No worries.
So I just had to install an update.
No worries whatsoever. So, yeah, I'm really pleased that you could come.
I can't hear you, so
you're not hearing me. I'll keep talking so that you can play with your audio until you can hear me. Testing.
I need to learn how to do this tech stuff. Look at you. You're such a professional.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you clearly. I hope you can hear me.
And I can hear you. We are good. I have to congratulate you. You're hitting the big time. I'm glad I got you early because I think another month from now, there's no way I'd be able to get you on the show. I mean, you got Crypto Zombie talking about you. You got everybody on the net talking about you. And it's for good reason. Here's my take on BritishHODL. You bring the knowledge of somebody that has been in the Bitcoin space for 10 years, but you've only been in for a couple of years. I mean, it's amazing how rapidly you have grasped the concept of Bitcoin. And also, what's refreshing to me is a lot of your viewpoints are not the typical viewpoints you would get from a lot of the like Bitcoin maxi folks. And you come at it from a very practical, very logical, pragmatic approach that is refreshing to me. And you bring a lot of sense to the space. So tell us how this came about. Give us your quick backstory because it's fascinating to me that you've come on the scene with such a splash.
Well, I can only say I appreciate that. And I have to tell you, I don't know exactly what's happening. I mean, when I see the views and people keep reaching out to me and they're like, these views are crazy, I have no clue. My intention for coming into and talking about Bitcoin was really after I spoke to my parents during the pandemic. So Bitcoin for me started in 2020. Before that, I thought it was an utter scam. And the idea of Bitcoin sank in during the pandemic. And talking to my parents and realizing that there are people in this world. I've been blessed. I started my first business when I was 16. I have been blessed to make money. I've been blessed to figure that part of my life out at a young age. There's people like my parents who, yes, they've done well, but they've been buying property, for example, for 35 years, doing the right thing, doing exactly what they were told to do, being told that if you work hard, if you save up, if you invest in real estate, you invest in the stock markets, you do the things that the history books say you should do, you'll be just fine. These are people who who are immigrants to the United Kingdom. Right? They've come over and they're doing the right thing. They're adding to the British economy. And guess what happens? 35 years later, the property portfolio that they have built for me and my brother needs to be worth 85 to 90% more in British pounds to make up for the amount of pounds that have been printed. That is why I decided to start talking on YouTube.
and you're needed because you're bringing a lot of sense, and you're really targeting high net worth individuals and other people that are serious about potentially protecting their wealth, and you're bringing the story that they all need to hear, and it's just fascinating to me. So, but let's back up a little bit. We talk a lot about watches also on this channel, and you showed one of your watches in one of your videos. What watch are you wearing right now?
I've got an FP Journe Elegant on. This is my best and my favorite travel watch.
Okay.
I don't know whether you can see.
Can you explain why you choose that one for travel purposes?
This is a unique watch, right? I
Mhm.
collect basically Patek Philippe and FP Journe. I
Okay.
sold all of my Rolexes
Good.
once I understood Bitcoin.
Good move.
And now I have a very, very small portfolio of watches compared to what I had before, but the value is still quite high. Um,
Hmm.
what I like about this one, funnily enough, this is a quartz watch.
Okay.
But the way Francois Paul made this watch, it's like I can put this watch down and leave it for 4 days. As soon as it senses some movement, it will find the shortest path back to the current time. That's cool,
Oh,
right?
okay.
It's on a
Cool. Yeah.
beautiful yeah, it's on a beautiful rubber bracelet. It's thin. I can wear it with anything. If I want to dress up a little bit, it looks fine. If I want to casual down, it looks fine. No one can really spot what the hell it is. Like it's just a beautiful, elegant version of a gentleman's sports watch that I think is quite nice.
And somebody was asking, you're not in the UK because it's dark there, and I think you had said that you're in Medellin in one of your videos. Uh,
I spend time in Latin America, Europe, and the Middle East. Right now, I'm in Latin
yeah,
America.
it looks beautiful there. You got a nice place there. So, yeah, circling back to the watches, just to give you my backstory, and I heard you also mention on one of your videos that having a nice watch can give you an edge in business dealings.
Of course.
And in my early days in the mid 70s, kind of dating myself here, I bought my first Rolex in 1976. It
Yep.
was a steel Datejust with an engine
Perfect.
turn bezel. It was
Perfect.
$560 new at the jeweler, and I wore that for a couple of years. Then in 1978, I bought my first date eight. I bought a old 1803 that at the time was it was a 1966 model,
Yep.
so it was like 10 years old. Had some stretch in the bracelet. Paid $2,200 for that, and I was selling cars, and I always dressed nice suits, the whole nine yards. And I was convinced that having a professional appearance helped me sell more cars than all the other salesmen.
Of course.
And also hustling, also working from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. That was what we did back in the day.
Yep.
And so, but I was also flipping the watches from time to time, because I would buy them out of the Washington Post. I was from Bethesda, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., affluent area. And so a lot of people had Rolexes even back then. And so they would sell them used in the Post, and they'd only be able to get so much for them because it's not like you can market them now using the internet and all that good stuff, right? So I'd get a good buy on a watch, clean it up a little bit, wear it for a while, and flip it, just like we would also do with cars. And so it was a good way to get a little bit of an edge, uh, in business. And so I wore date eights for 40 years. I sold my last Rolex about 5 years ago, and like you, put most of the money in Bitcoin. I also have a fairly nice Grand Seiko here. Let me see if I can cut to this. Which
Beautiful.
watch? So this is just an 18 karat gold dress watch, spring drive.
That's all anyone needs to make a great impression anywhere.
Yeah, and it's got a deployant clasp on it, so it's real easy on and off the wrist. And then I've got, let's see here, I've got that diver watch, also a spring drive titanium Grand Seiko diver to wear, when I'm beating around. And so that's kind of,
You're a big fan of Grand Seiko. What is it about Grand Seiko that you love?
I transitioned to them like I said, about 5 years ago, I still had the day date. My last day date was an 18238 that I bought new in the year 2000. I had it for 20 years. And my eyes were getting old, and I was in denial. I wasn't wearing glasses, and it was getting so I couldn't put my arm far enough away to read the dial on the day date anymore. It was a 36 mil day date.
Okay.
And so it was spending a lot of time in the watch box. And I don't like box watches. I like watches I wear. And so it had to go. And that's when I bought the 231 diver. Very easy to read, even without my reading glasses, no problems whatsoever. And this watch is a 38.5 mil, so it has a much bigger dial than what the 36 mil Rolex had. So I can even read this one without my reading glasses in a
Yeah.
pinch, right?
Yes.
So I transitioned, and I had learned about Grand Seiko a while previous to that, but I'd never seen them in person. And I went to a place called Little Treasure Jewelers in Gambrels, Maryland, and looked at them. And I was just really impressed with the pieces. And so I got the diver first, and then a couple years later, I got this dress piece because I felt I needed an 18 karat gold piece again. I just felt that
Once you put
I,
gold on the wrist,
I
nothing.
just felt I needed it. I'm old school. I like yellow gold, 18 karat yellow gold. So now we're going to talk about this in the show too. I've got my eye on the new GMT Master and all 18 karat gold with the Jubilee bracelet
Hmm.
because I'll be able to read that easily, right? And they're
Hmm.
nice and thin on the wrist. I wore GMTs in rotation with the date eights back in the day. That was my steel watch that I rotated with the date eight. It was always a GMT Master. I had a sub for a while, one of the red subs, with the red on
Yep.
the dial.
Yep.
I had one of those for a while, sold it to a good friend of mine who still has it. But I've got an eye on the GMT, and this is what I did. When Bitcoin was 16,000, I bought a Bitcoin, and I said, listen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this particular Bitcoin until it's worth 100,000. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to pay the capital gains tax. I'm going to buy the gold GMT for about 38,000. I'm going to buy a used Lexus LS 430 or 460 in mint condition, probably pay about 25 grand for that. So I'll have the Lexus in mint condition, and I'll have the GMT basically for $16,000 out of pocket. So that's what I did. I just set that Bitcoin aside,
I
and
did that
and
with
it's
my parents' retirement. So once I figured out Bitcoin was about 9,000 pounds at the time, and like
mhm,
I was buying and accumulating and whatever, and I was like, they've done really well, and they're gonna be
mhm,
fine, right? But in my culture, they're always gonna expect me to take care of everything. So I was like, well, if Bitcoin is right, what I could do is basically take care of my parents' entire retirement fund for 9 grand right now. So I did. So I have one Bitcoin that they will basically at some point be able to sell on a monthly basis, whatever they need, or borrow against it, or whatever. We'll figure something out. So I've basically done exactly the same thing except with my parents' retirement. But what I
yeah.
would do in your scenario is actually just borrow against that Bitcoin, buy the stuff that you want to buy on finance because they're depreciating assets, and that way you get to keep the Bitcoin.
Well, here's the thing. I am very lucky, and they call all of us that got into Bitcoin relatively early lucky, right? They don't realize what it takes to hold Bitcoin for 10 years, right? They haven't done that, and you don't know until you've done it. I started out trading Bitcoin a little bit, and then I ran into Adam Meister in 2000. When was that? 14 or 15. And he convinced me just buy and hold. He said, "Don't try to time the market. It's just too much stress. You're not going to get it right, and you're just going to lose Bitcoin that way." So from around 2015 on, I've just been stacking Bitcoin. And here on the channel live, I bought 2.5 Bitcoin when it was 10,000. Okay, I bought Bitcoin when it was 4,000 live here on the channel. I'm talking whole Bitcoins. I don't buy fractions of Bitcoins. And so I've been stacking Bitcoin. So I have the stack that Adam Meister recommended back in the day. You recommend one Bitcoin now. He had a much higher recommendation back in the day. So I have my cold storage set aside that I'm never going to touch. That is, I'll put it this way: it's dozens of Bitcoin. I'm not going to say how many, but it's a significant
You're
enough.
good.
If this
You're good.
does what we think it's going to do, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So I figured it's okay for me to just buy one Bitcoin and set it
Why?
aside and
Why?
earmark it for the
But
watch and the
Craig,
car.
why? Why do that? We finally have an asset that you can't get more of, and you will have opportunities at that point to borrow against it, and you want to give it to their grubby
But no,
hands
this
of
is probably gonna
BlackRock.
wait a minute now. I'm
Fuck
thinking this
that.
is gonna be next November, HODL.
You'll be able to do all of
I'm
these things,
thinking
Craig.
this is gonna be I'm thinking we're gonna have $100,000 Bitcoin next November,
I
a
agree.
year from this November.
I agree.
That's my time frame. So now if it takes longer than that, fine, that's fine. I'll wait. But here's the thing. I have never borrowed money in my life. The first condo I bought, I paid cash for. It was in a Bethesda high rise called the Promenade Towers Complex. I did their website, promenadetowers.com. Nice place, 20 acres of ground in Bethesda, Maryland. It was $70,000. Okay. I paid cash for it. I was selling cars, making good money, right? Then I bought my first detached house. I sold that. I added some money to it. I paid cash for that. I've never borrowed money in my life. Never. For car, house, nothing. And people say, and this is what gets me, where these people right now are saying, I can never buy a house. Well, then you're not out there hustling. You're not out there working. If you're out there working and you're making $100,000 a year and you're renting a room in some woman's basement, you can save 50 grand a year towards a house. In 4 years, you can have $200,000 to pay cash for a house if you want a house. Okay. And in this area, you can still buy houses for $200,000. Okay. Not a great house, but you can still buy them. So these people that say that they can't buy a house ever because of whatever reasons, I don't get it. I think there's more opportunities now to make six figures than ever before.
But
I was
so
making six figures in the mid 70s, okay, selling freaking cars. So if
I
you can
get
do
you.
it, then, you know,
I
and
get you, but that's really not, to me, that's not the point, because there's always going to be people like you, there's always going to be people like me that figure it out at a young age, that just figure out how to do this sort of stuff and start creating value in the world. The problem that we have with the world is the fact that the average person who literally just wants to help you build your business, go home, have a family life, raise some children, have a good time, that's the person that's getting fucked. So that is really the person that Bitcoin is for. It's not for, Bitcoin's not like, yes, I always say this, and this gets some people triggered. The rich need Bitcoin more than the poor, but the poor need Bitcoin adoption more than the rich. And so what I'm trying to say by that is the real people that are struggling right now are the people that don't want to. And that's okay, because 50 years ago they didn't have to. And now you not only got to go work in a job which has where the wage inflation is not keeping up with inflation, you've now got to become a full-time speculator to try and buy and control assets that are going up faster than inflation. So that's really
okay,
the
so
issue.
Hodl, look at this comment right on the screen now, right on point. It's harder now. Houses and cars are more a percentage of income. I don't know that that's true. I think that you can make significantly more money now. Again, I was making 100 grand a year in the mid 70s when I was 18 years old. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. There were people making $200,000 then. All right. So you can make enough money to make up for whatever the price. The houses are, it's a competitive environment. Okay. There's other people trying to buy that house. The reason the house is 400,000 or 500, whatever the price is that's what the market will bear. And you just have to play in that market. I mean, I don't get it. And there are
So
places where the houses are cheap. You go to, the Midwest, houses are cheap in a lot of places. You can buy a house for 80 grand.
yeah, so I
So,
mean, look,
so
I understand what you're saying, and I guess my mindset is exactly what you're saying. However, I've come to empathize with the other side of like that comment that you just put up, because at the end of the day, like
yeah,
my dad, who came to the United Kingdom, could have bought 10 houses when he first came to the UK. Me, 30, 40 years later, I can still buy 10 houses. It's not going to be the same area. It's not going to be the same style of house. It's not going to be as big. It's not going to be as high quality. And that's really the issue. That spread
Yeah, I
is
think
what.
there's a bubble. I think there's a bubble. I think it's like the Rolexes, right? The last couple of years, there's been clearly a bubble, and that bubble is slowly deflating, and it'll get back to normal. People on this channel don't believe me when I say that when you used to go in and buy a solid gold Rolex from the AD, you could get 20 to 40% off depending on the watch, depending on how long it had set in their window, right? And so on a steel one, you could get 10% off routinely. You could
I
walk
remember
in and get 10% off.
I remember when I walked into a jeweler in Canary Wharf in London before the pandemic, like maybe 3 or 4 years before the pandemic, and I was offered a Patek Philippe 5168G blue dial, which is now one of the hardest to get Patek Philippe's out there, and they had it there.
Mhm.
They were like, "Do you want to buy it? Please, do you want to take this watch? We'll give it to you right now." And I was a first time customer to that jeweler.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to get back to normal. What we've had the last several years is abnormal. We're going to get back to, see, here's the thing with the Rolexes is a lot of people own Rolexes now that were quote investors. They have a box full of steel Rolexes, right? You see them on social media. They've got 12 of them. They've got like 4 GMT Masters all in steel, right? Because everybody wanted steel Rolexes, right? And so when these people realize that these are no longer good investments, if they ever were, they were good flip items, but I wouldn't call that an investment. When they start dumping those things, and when it gets back to normal, where people might have one, maybe 2 Rolexes, like all my friends back in the day, we all had 1, maybe 2 Rolexes. We didn't have 12. Nobody had 12. Okay, this is not normal. People that can't really afford the watches in the first place bought a whole bunch of watches and are sitting on them, hoping that they're a good investment. When they realize they aren't, and these all start coming on the market, again, I think things are going to come back to normal.
Well,
And it might take another.
you've also got the issue that Rolex has now spent the last 3 years upping their production, right? So you're going to have a flood of supply coming on, both from Rolex and from those people that have tried to hold these watches and realize they can't hold on to them. So,
Okay, so here's a Bitcoin question Wave has. Can you address the long-term BTC security issue with it ultimately relying on transaction fees? See, there's a lot of FUD out there on this that, once the Bitcoins are all issued, all mined, that the miners aren't going to make enough money. Hey, how much do people pay to wire $100,000 to Europe right now from the US? Okay. There are always going to be people that are going to be willing to pay the fees to move their Bitcoin around. And they're going to be able to make plenty of money on fees. Right now, Bitcoins are just mainly sitting. Most people don't move them around. I don't move my Bitcoin around. I have people that I pay in Satoshis, contractors that work for me, but that's just out of my wallet, a Satoshi wallet. And that's just money flow, right? I keep topping it off and I keep paying them. But as far as Bitcoin itself, Bitcoin, correct me if I'm wrong, BritishHODL, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, large chunks of Bitcoin are going to be moving around on a regular basis, and those miners are going to be able to make fees big time.
yes,
Or
at
is
the
there
end of the
something
day,
I'm missing?
no, at the end of the day, where there is, for me, Bitcoin becomes a reserve asset. So
Mhm.
there will be very, very large transactions going on all the time, which won't cause a load on the overall network. If anybody's going to use it as a currency to actually trade with, it's gonna be a layer 2 or 3 solution that goes on to.
Okay, so Lost Spring Bar says, but we need a reason to move the Bitcoin around. There isn't a reason to spend it right now. Nobody accepts it. Well, first of all, anybody that spends their Bitcoin and doesn't replace it, as BritishHODL would say, is a fool, right? so so
Moron.
there's that. A moron. Okay. So there's that. But here's the thing, and you say nobody accepts it. I see a future where nobody will want fiat. I'm already telling my clients that I give them a 10% discount if they pay in Bitcoin. Okay, all of them. And some of them are taking me up on it. Okay. So if they pay me in fiat, they're going to pay the full boat. If they pay me in Bitcoin, I give them 10% off. Okay. There's going to be a time when I'm going to start saying 20% off. And eventually there's going to be a time when I'm going to tell them I won't even accept your fiat. And I think there will be a lot of people like that. Again, now we're talking 10, 20 years down the road. And so, I mean, British, wouldn't you rather have somebody pay you in Bitcoin?
Absolutely. However, I don't think we reach a future in the near or midterm where you're going to buy a coffee with Bitcoin in a major G20 country. But I've always held that opinion.
So you don't think that the Lightning Network is going to spread around like all of Central America in the next couple of years and then keep spreading from there and just become something that is just normal that people want you to pay with Lightning, with the Lightning Network?
No, I don't think that happens.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see. This is good watching. This whole thing is exciting times.
Super exciting. Super exciting.
So we are going to have another guest coming in fairly soon, hopefully. I think Amy's going to come in. She
Excellent.
had an interview with you the other day. And so, but in the meantime, I got to show your YouTube again. And then I've got to subscribe to this, folks. I'm going to make this full screen. Do this real quick so they can see
I had no
this.
idea what to put on the banner. So that's what we came up with. Apologies if it's too ugly for anyone.
Hey, just subscribe, folks. That's what you got to do. And now let me also show his Twitter. Okay, so there's BritishHODL's Twitter. And while we're at it, let's show Amy's Twitter so that you make sure you follow. And
Definitely
these have been on the ticker
at
the bottom also. And so, and I think we might have another special guest, but we'll talk about her when she comes in later. And we might even have another guest. We might have a couple of guests coming in. So let me exit full screen mode. There we go. So this is, I mean, what I've been trying to do, British, is I've been trying to convince my watch people that watch this channel. There's a lot of high net worth individuals that watch this channel because I do reviews on really nice stuff, okay,
Yep.
all over my channel, whether it be a Breezer Uptown bicycle made in USA, or it's a Hickey Freeman sport coat, or an Oxford suit, whatever it is, it's high end that we talk about it on this channel. Okay. And so camera gear, lenses, you name it, we talk about it on this channel. So a lot of high net worth individuals tune
What about
in.
cigars?
You're going to cover the cigar.
Can you give me? I'm gonna cut the camera for literally 10 seconds and just grab my cigar lighter that I forgot over there. Just 10
absolutely seconds. Absolutely. There you go. Now you see his cool logo there. Okay. And so British will be the one that's going to be talking about the cigars. And by the way, anybody watching live, if you ask a question in the chat, we will show it. We will show your question and we will address it. So that's how this whole channel works. This is an interactive. The reason we do these live shows is to interact with you guys. Otherwise, we would just do produced content, which we do that also. And so speaking of content, we do have another guest that's going to come in about 15 minutes. Are you here for until 6 o'clock?
I've got time. I'm just about to light up this cigar.
Okay, because we were planning on going until 6. And so we've got another special guest coming in about 15 minutes. Amy should be here soon, I'm hoping. And so we're going to,
as you want, my friend.
So we're going to talk about some other things. But circling back to these individuals, I do have another individual that hopefully will also be calling in that I just recently orange pilled. His name is Eric, and I've known him for quite a while, and he's been a client of my business. I'm not going to say what business he owns here in Frederick County because I don't know if he wants to be doxxed, but I will say that I've been talking to him about Bitcoin since it was about $4,000. And for some reason, recently, he contacted me and he said, how do I get this Bitcoin stuff? I want to get at least one. And I said, what, have you been listening to BritishHODL? He said, no, but I just want to have at least one Bitcoin. And so this must be getting around. This must be just a general thing. Maybe you started it, but I think it's just getting around that you should have at least one Bitcoin. And so give us your rationale. Again, Adam Meister back in the day had a number higher than that. I'll say publicly, he said repeatedly 21 Bitcoin was the number that he always preached. Okay, back in the day. This was when it was like $300 each or something, right? So how did you land on one Bitcoin to be fabulously wealthy?
Well, if you think about it, there are 21 million Bitcoin. After the pandemic, there's 55 million millionaires in the world.
Okay.
And so if you aggregate that, I think if you get one Bitcoin and you do and by the way, every single cycle, Bitcoin is pricing out certain economic classes. Western, Eastern, or third world middle class is already finished. This past cycle, we probably priced out Western middle class as well. Maybe not the tip of it, but it's majority of it's been priced out. Next, we'll price out low digit millionaires. Because if you can if you've got, say a $3 million portfolio and Bitcoin's $300,000 a coin, you can't liquidate 300 grand to dump into an asset that you don't know anything about. It's not convenient, because most of those people, when you look at the wealth distribution in different assets, most of those people that have like a $3 million net worth, they're investing in property. You can't sell a third of a house or whatever to try and get into Bitcoin.
Hold on 1 second, HODL. I'm going to bring Eric up because I want him to hear this too. So,
hey guys.
Eric, can you hear us?
Yeah, I definitely can. How y'all doing?
Fantastic.
We're doing great. So this is BritishHODL, and we were just talking about you briefly, and I said that you recently contacted me.
Yes.
And said that you want to accumulate at least one Bitcoin.
Yes.
And so, can you share with HODL why you made that decision?
Sure. So, well, like many of us, so I'm an entrepreneur, second generation. To give you a little history about me, and when I say I'm entrepreneur, I run 4 companies right now. 3 of which were started by
somebody. Wait a second. Somebody says we're getting feedback. Does anybody have the show? Do you have the show playing 2 places, Eric?
No.
That we would be getting feedback?
He sounds fine to me, by the way.
Okay. So go ahead, Eric. Yeah, I hear you good, but they're saying in the chat we got an echo. Go ahead.
All right. Well, let me know, because I can turn this down on my headset a little bit. So,
okay.
How's it sound now? Are they saying it's all right in the chat?
Why don't you set it so that you can hear us, but not too loudly?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can just hear you guys. So that's probably what it is.
Fine.
So, so I run 4 companies, multi-million-dollar companies, and we started in business. My folks started in business in 1979, and we've built up a pretty large group of businesses. And in looking at this and looking at what's the long-term goal, I wanted to diversify my portfolio. I've got a lot of my monies wrapped up in real estate and in hard assets, and of course reinvesting into our businesses. And I really felt like this was a great time to diversify. I've been watching and listening to Craig for years, because Craig has partnered with us on 2 of our companies, 2 of our businesses, and he's always got that Bitcoin ring. I don't know if you guys have seen it.
The Bitcoin signet ring, huh?
He's always got the Bitcoin ring on. And anytime that I would see him, I'd be like, he'd say, you gotta do this, man. You gotta do this. And just been watching it, I guess years ago, it was so volatile. You didn't really know, is it going to get shut down? Is it here to stay? Is it going to, and here we are at the precipice, the point where this thing could really take off. And I just felt like the timing, talking to Craig, that the timing was fantastic to jump head first into it. And so and start buying up. We're gonna go for a couple coins here,
I
Craig.
I think you're very smart because here's the thing: there's less risk now than if you would have gotten in years ago, right?
Sure,
When I got in, I thought that there was a chance it could be shut down, right?
sure.
I'm like, why would the government allow this thing to exist? It's insane that they're allowing it to exist. But now that they're all starting to embrace it, yeah, these people, senators, congressmen, all of them are starting to buy Bitcoin. So the
Right.
game theory is such that none of them are going to want to shut it down. Amy is in the house. Thank you for coming in, and we watched your interview with HODL, and so I figured it'd be good to have you on the show here, and
Thank you.
just enjoy this moment. And we've had on the ticker down below your Twitter handle for folks to follow you. And so Eric is a new Bitcoiner. He's just been recently, we can say, orange pilled. We spent hours on the phone talking about Bitcoin recently, and he's even got a hardware device that he's going to secure his Bitcoin offline.
Good,
He's
good.
been buying from Swan Bitcoin. So, Amy, do you have any pearls of wisdom for him for a new Bitcoiner like Eric who's stacking?
I didn't catch much of your conversation before, so apologies. I was having some hotel Wi-Fi issues, but thank you for inviting me. Great to be here. Hi, British again.
Hey,
I've
hey,
actually got
Amy.
I've got an England hoodie on today. I
There
feel
we
like
go.
I've always got my England merch on when you're here.
Perfect.
Pearls of wisdom. So
Pearls of wisdom sounds great.
Pearls of wisdom. I guess just picking up on what Craig just said. What you said. I wonder. I can't see how will the government ever allow this to continue. I guess what went through my head then is, well, the government. If we're talking about Western countries or in general, governments are supposed to protect the people or represent the people. And if you look around the Western world as a starting point, but obviously look around at less privileged countries, they're quite happy to stand by and see people struggle. So, you
And
start to
sometimes
question.
cause that struggle. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think you need to look past this complex, confusing, multi-layered, ridiculous system that just does not work. But the average person is so busy, and as a result of that, to lift their head and go, well, why? And I was talking to HODL about this and have spoken to many people about this. It's like it becomes personal at some point because people only care enough about something when they're in enough pain, I think. And for me, It was, thankfully not a life and death situation, but spread out over a long enough period of time it would be, in the sense that my mum lost her husband, and the two of them were living in a house with my grandmother as well, who was, my stepfather and my grandmother subsequently passed away, but they went from having 3 UK state pensions under one roof to having one. And I had no idea until my mum and my stepdad owned the house outright. There was no mortgage. They were in their 60s and 70s. And when I'm an only child, so I stepped in and was helping my mum deal with the aftermath of, wills and estates and that kind of thing, which wasn't straightforward because he had his own children and there was a lot to sort out. Anyway, eventually Mum had sold the house and we were in the process of buying a smaller house for her to move into on her own. And I was actually going to have to take out a mortgage for her to be able to afford to downsize once his estate had been addressed and executed and his kids got their inheritance. Which we knew was happening. We absolutely knew what the will said as and when that day came. But eventually my mum and I actually sat down and I said, okay, it's all well and good. We're buying this house. You've got somewhere to live. Fantastic. How are you for cash flow? And she'd never had time in 18 months of post grieving and all the, you kind of, I don't know if any of you have lost a close family member or gone through that, but you just go into admin mode. Like you don't have time to grieve a lot of the time, or a lot of us do. And it wasn't until 18 months later that I sat down with my mum and we'd put in the offer. It had been accepted for this house. And thankfully in the UK, the property real estate buying system is useless. So you can pull out at any moment, and you're not committed until you pay your deposit. Well, we were about to pay the deposit, and I sat down with my mum. I was like, how are you doing for cash flow? And we sat down, and it was shocking to me how her now UK state pension was about a third of the money that she was needing to live on, because
Wow.
she'd got used to living with three of them. And they certainly weren't living an extravagant life. You know, they paid the bills. Her and my stepfather went on a couple of holidays a year for a week in Europe close by. But I was like, not only do you not have enough money to live, I'm taking out a mortgage to put a roof over your head in your 70s. This is not working. Like, something's not going to, this is not going to work. So we pulled out of the property purchase, and I kind of just went, okay, what do we do? And I got her to move into an investment property that I owned. And we took what capital she had left from selling her primary home and invested it. I did something with a property company, like an individual who was doing creative deals, a bit like what HODL used to do. And the rest I put into a combination of Bitcoin and other projects, which we won't talk about.
No.
Fortunately, I would never encourage anybody to do that. Fortunately, I had some experience with that. And this was just prior to 2020. But long story short, I then went on that journey of, wow, this is amazing. I'm making so much money. Didn't take profit. I didn't lose money, thankfully. I did okay. And got out having bought a bit more runway for my mum. But the short version is, you know, thank God I found Bitcoin, because it was only going down that rabbit hole and extending the runway, which I'm still doing. I'm just constantly trying to get whatever creative income streams or growth mechanisms. And ultimately, it all came down to, well, now everything's going into Bitcoin, including another investment property that I had. So, you know, what I mean is it becomes personal when you start to realize that why would the government let this happen? It's like, well, the government is supposed to represent us. You know, they might shut down Bitcoin, but what's the alternative that represents us and is best for the people? And most people in Western countries and the middle classes are struggling. Well, then something's not working and hasn't been for decades.
Sure.
So that's a long-winded rant.
So you've kind of now come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is definitely the place to put your value, your wealth.
Mm-hmm. And, mine, yes. But it's also, you know, in terms of, my mum is 76. So in terms of managing or helping her invest and her understand it, you know, it's a very different conversation in terms of risk when someone's in their 70s. But even with a 4 or 5 year time horizon, it's the best option.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, Craig, the one thing that I ran into, and I don't know how many people that are getting started, because you guys are all established in your stacking. I'm very, very, very new. What have we been working on this about a month? Maybe
really, you've
3
been
weeks?
Buying for more like a week or two.
Yeah, took us about a month, but it was kind of for me. I got to tell you guys, when you go to share with other people about what you're doing, the response is what? What do you? I mean, now obviously, when you guys first got started in this, I mean, did you share it with other people, and then they looked at you like you had 3 heads, and they were like, no, don't do that. No, oh my God, don't take your money and do that.
You think it's bad now when you share it with people? They think you're crazy.
Yes.
Go back 8 or 10 years.
That's what I was asking. Like, you guys, how long have you all been investing?
People just thought I was absolutely insane. They just thought that it was an absolute Ponzi scheme. You know, I don't want to hear anything about it. I've got a friend that I've been talking to about it since it was $30 a Bitcoin.
Wow.
Literally. And every time I talk to him about it, first of all, he says, I don't want you to talk to me about it anymore. And second of all, he says, it's too late for me anyway. Every time he says it's too late. At $300, he said it was too late. At $3,000, he said it was too late. every single time at $10,000, they said it was too late. Right. And I'm like, aren't you seeing a theme here, guy? Every time you say it's
Yeah.
too late, Bitcoin 10X's,
Well,
but
the
no,
the
you can't. People don't understand. I don't it's, and it's not, to me, it's not that complicated. We have a limited supply item, 21 million units, that
yeah.
eventually everybody in the world is going to want it. That's where we're headed. And I don't
Right.
understand why they don't see it. It's not that complicated to me. But HODL, why do they not see it? They don't even see it now, a lot of them.
Well, so I thought Bitcoin was a complete scam until 2020. Just to give you some feedback as to where I'm at. Looks like someone's super angry behind me. I guess I don't know whether you guys can hear them.
They didn't get Bitcoin.
Tell me about it. So yeah, I thought it was a scam, and I'll tell you something. My personality is more so of the aggressive kind. Once I figure something out. So by the time I had put 10% of my net worth into Bitcoin, I had to walk around a park during the pandemic in London with my best friend and drum into his head after 5 to 6 hours of constant walking over a period of 3 or 4 days why he needed to put 10 grand into Bitcoin. So to me, when someone says that you've got like they look at me like I've got three heads, I think I take that as a good sign, because in my
Yeah.
life, every time someone has said I was crazy, I always end up winning. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so I think people don't get it because they just don't understand it. People are so used to controlled assets. People are
Sure.
so used to assets that is in someone else's custody, someone's taking care of it. I get the benefit of it by the price
Right.
appreciation. And if people went back to the original, purpose of the year that's printed on the top of your hat, they would understand why Bitcoin is extremely important. Right?
Yeah.
It's severing that tie. Bitcoin is the declaration of independence from the fiat hegemony and the debt system that has been subjugating humanity for 230 fucking years.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
1776 moment for fiat. That's what Bitcoin
Yeah.
is.
So,
Yeah, and
Amy, what about you? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
go
No, that's
ahead,
right.
Amy.
What about what specifically? What
Do,
about
do
me?
people say
Like,
you're crazy
to
when you
your
talk to them
friends
about?
and
Oh,
yeah.
people think I'm crazy anyway. I've always been a bit like, well, my background for the last 10 years was digital marketing, and as in working for myself, which morphed into coaching. So I've been in that kind of digital space, which means I've had mentors and people around me who have been like looking at Web3 and the decentralized web for way ahead of my awareness, which I think it's easy to underestimate how early in terms of adoption we are, and no one knows how quickly that adoption is going to happen. But so I was very fortunate to be around people who gave me a heads up, and then the kind of, I guess the light bulbs were just all about the value of freedom. So my reason for wanting to work for myself was purely so I could be geographically mobile. I did the whole digital nomad thing, spent 6 months on a beach in Thailand and, taking pictures of myself with my laptop on a beach. And it's like, whoa, wonderful. And so many people you speak to think that's what they want. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, great, do it, but it will get old very quickly for some people. And I think when I realized there was this sense of, and part of it's just getting older, but wanting a sense of purpose. So I'd already done a few things that were slightly against the grain, things that are probably more common now. So I've always had people say, not so much you're crazy. I've been quite fortunate that I've had supportive friends around me that have been like, good for you, go for it. No, I don't think I'd have the balls to do that. But the point being that, if you do what everybody else is doing in anything, is the world working? That might be a bit high level, but I just kind of, those cliches exist for a reason. And, going back to what Craig said about why don't people get it? There's a fixed supply, blah, 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 blah. I think we actually have to remember as people that are already in Bitcoin or content creators, or, even if you're just telling your friends and family, you have to meet them where they're at, which is the problem or the reason for their pain. I told this story on my podcast with HODL, and I've told it many times, but my neighbor is a perfect example. He's a tradesman. He's got his own business. He's done everything right. But his mortgage is now 14 years instead of 5 years that he'd made all this progress overpaying his mortgage so that he could be free of his business, or at least significantly reduced hours in his business when his kids started high school. But he still didn't even know why his mortgage is now 14 years instead of 5. 10 years of his children's high school years that he could have been present, he may not be. And I'm like, well, that's not okay. Why don't you care about why? So you've got to meet people where they're at. You can't just jump to, well, Bitcoin's a fixed supply of money. People don't understand that there's a unlimited supply of money in the system we're already in.
Right.
And so I think going against the grain, it's a bit, people don't want to push back. People don't want to be the black sheep, but it's not Bitcoin is money. Everybody uses money, and the money that we currently have isn't working. It isn't fair. And, this makes it fair, but you have to meet people where they're at. And I think just meet their pain.
Yeah. And I think what's unfortunate is a lot of people that could have gotten into Bitcoin relatively early and didn't. Now the big money is going to start coming in, as HODL talks about, with this ETF coming and so on and so forth. The opportunity to front run the big money, that window's closing, right? And that's the thing that concerns me, is because I've been trying to get people to front run all of that. I've been saying, hey, just get yourself some Bitcoin, get in ahead of all these, because Michael Saylor was the first big player to come in and buy a big chunk of Bitcoin and talk about it publicly, but he's not going to be the last.
Sure.
There's going to be a bunch of these people. HODL mentioned 56 million millionaires. I think, isn't there like 2,600 billionaires or something?
Something like that.
I mean, it's like these people are going to start coming in.
Yeah.
When do you think, HODL, when do you think these big money people are going to really start coming in earnest?
I think it's when Bitcoin gets this ESG stamp that BlackRock has been pushing. And obviously, we all know ESG is a scam, but if we're going to unlock $60 trillion of capital, let's go ESG on Bitcoin. No problem. ESG, yes.
Haven't they kind of done that already, though? Haven't they kind of?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think the tipping point for that comes when you see one of the big, like we just had KPMG come out with a report that said Bitcoin is now good for the environment. So all of a sudden, after BlackRock files for an ETF, KPMG puts out this report to their investors. So the tipping point for me comes when someone like the New York Times or someone like that does a piece that now says Bitcoin is good for the environment. And that's coming. As soon as KPMG said that, I said within 6 to 9 months, there will be a New York Times report or something like that, Washington Post, someone like that will say Bitcoin is good for the environment. And I think that's when these bigger guys get involved, because as people don't like to admit it, but if you're worth, you're worth Warren Buffett levels of money, you have got requirements. There are requirements about what you can speak about and what you cannot speak about.
Sure.
Because capital is so intertwined. So once BlackRock allows that ESG stamp to go on the investment, I guarantee you all of these people are going to start flooding in. Because who doesn't want an 80% CAGR on the worst new investment idea coming out of BlackRock for the last 10 years?
Okay, so HODL, now we can really get the answer to the question. We're going to bring Brianna, aka Briefit Dance, onto the show.
Hello.
Because she started the last bull run.
Anybody
Okay,
hear me?
and I can prove it. Let me show you right now. I gotta find it.
I don't know a single person that hasn't seen your videos.
Anybody hear me?
I have to. Okay.
Yes.
So, I can hear you. Okay, so let me show this. I got to make this full screen real quick.
Bluetooth.
I'm going to explain this to you guys. If you look at that tweet that somebody tweeted out, you see that orange line, not orange, that purple line, that's when she released her bull video. Okay, see the chart there? See how it was flat prior to that? The price of Bitcoin was to the left of that was flat. and to the right of it, it went parabolic. Okay. And people laugh at me when I make this point. But here's the thing: the gentleman that tweeted that, he's spot on, because here's what happened: Michael Saylor bought $500 million roughly worth of Bitcoin, and then the price was flat for like a month. Okay, the bull run didn't start, and people talked about it on crypto Twitter. There was some talk, and he did a couple of interviews, but he wasn't a rock star. Okay, then all of a sudden, this bull video comes out. Overnight, it gets 600,000 views. All of a sudden, Michael Saylor is like a superstar, and he starts going on all the podcasts, starts doing all the interviews. And let me tell you something about Michael Saylor, because I knew him from back in the day. He was always very shy. He did a few interviews here and there, and he did a few events and so forth. But I will tell you, and I'll take it, I will be saying this until the day I die, this pivoted him into a mega rock star as far as Bitcoin goes. And Briefit Dance gets the credit for making that happen. And if you don't believe that, I'm going to let you hear it in Michael Saylor's own words. Okay? So let me go here. I got a little video clip I'm going to play of Michael Saylor. Hopefully I can find it. Here we go. Watch this, folks.
I know. Now for what's important. So, Michael, I wake up every single day, and the first thing that pops into my head is Michael Saylor, bull, bull, bull. I need to know if that song is stuck in your head as well, and what you think of it.
It's quite hypnotic, isn't it?
I'm not even kidding. It's actually the first thing I think of.
You know, so first of all, I cannot officially comment on the video, but it's hypnotic, and it does make me think this, which is one of the great strengths of the Bitcoin community and crypto Twitter, is there's this massive amount of very creative, inspired, entrepreneurial people, and they're always thinking about how to communicate the message and how to drive awareness. And if I hired 100 people in marketing, and I spent $40 million a year, and I said, I'm going to market Bitcoin, they would all huddle and they would work through all their ideas. And in 90 days, they would come up with an idea which is about 1/40th as good as that. It would get knocked down by the lawyers. And there's none of that would ever happen. And yet in Twitter, you've got 1,000 people trying 1,000 different things. And if they're really awful, they get one like and they die. And if they're, there's no guarantee. We don't know that someone else didn't create their own video. It's just you didn't see it. So someone gets together with somebody else. They produce something. They want to send a message. It picks up steam. It goes viral. It gets 600,000 views, right? And it happens in 24 hours while you're sleeping. And that's the real power of decentralization and the hive mind and the cyber swarm. And it's just awesome.
I mean, you're squarely entrenched in the Bitcoin community now. There's no question about that. I mean, what do you make of the community as a whole, the anonymous, obviously there's a huge...
Okay, so that's enough. So here you go. In his own words, did you hear what the man said?
There you go.
He said he could hire a whole team of people and work on it for 6 months, and they wouldn't come up with what Brianna did. And so Brianna, what's the next bull run? When does the next bull run start? And where does it top out? What's going to be the top of the next bull run?
I'm not
So
sure.
we just need
No
to know, when
pressure.
is it going to start? When's it going to start? And what's the top?
I don't know. I mean, I can't do like a music. I can't make sure that a music video will do the same thing, but it's pretty soon. I think it's coming. If it's time.
So April is the halving. Okay, so we're going to have the halving in April.
April will like.
So
after
usually
April,
it tops off a year or so after that, right? It takes about a year or so after the halving to have the blow off top. Are we looking at $100,000 Bitcoin, $250,000 Bitcoin? Give us a number.
Yeah, I'm thinking like 100,000.
You're thinking 100. So Brianna's always very conservative on her predictions. All right. So what do you think, HODL? What do you think
I
for the
mean,
timeline of the next?
I don't care honestly the price. I'm just hodling. Like I'm not.
Are you? Oh, by the way, you announced last year, right? Was it last year that you became a whole coiner?
Yeah, last year.
Because you announced publicly that you were a whole coiner.
Yeah.
So HODL, how many 23-year-olds do you know that are whole coiners?
Listen, my circle's different, so we got a. That's a different circle. So yeah, generally not that many, but in my circle, everyone's a whole coiner.
Because
That's
you've been
awesome.
telling them to be a whole coiner.
That's good though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, good
okay,
for
what's your prediction, HODL? Because we got to let you go soon. But what's your prediction for this next bull run? When's it going to start, and what's the cap?
I think we cap out at somewhere between 15 and 20 times the bear market bottom, which was 15,500. So that's like
This
230.
cycle.
Yeah, for this next run. And so do you think the timing is going to be
subject, for this next cycle, subject to an ETF being approved? Because an ETF being approved brings in roughly $100 million a day worth of buying. Based on Fundstrat's analysis, right now the equilibrium price is being maintained with $25 million a day of purchasing. So if we have $100 million a day of new purchasing coming in, that'll take the price at the current mining release that's coming out to $140,000. Then you half that, you're at 280. So that's before any bull market demand kicks in, before any tightening of the supply happens, before the blow off tops happen, before any of that. So yeah, I think I'm being pretty conservative if an ETF is approved.
And you're fairly bullish that you think the ETF is going to be approved around the time of the halving or just before the halving?
Personally,
As you said, they're going to wait a while so that they can get their salespeople and all of them geared up, ready to sell the product.
Well, in order to
listen to your video.
In order to do that, you actually need the ETF approved, because no salesperson is going to spend time learning about something that they can't sell yet. So you need an ETF approved. That's why I said.
So that's right. They need it approved a couple months before the halving so they can sell into the halving. That's what you said. Yeah.
So I think that it gets approved in 2023. If I'm right, here's the thing. If I'm right, we'll know by October 17th, because that's when the deadlines are for 2023. If we don't get that deadline, it's January 10th, which, people will say I got it wrong, but I'll consider it a win if it gets approved in January 10th and not by the 31st of December. So, I think it comes before the halving. I don't know how long before the halving, but it makes sense for me that it gets approved and launched in 2023 in preparation for a salesperson to call someone up and say, the halving's coming, you better get in, because that's what allows them to sell.
Sure, a sense of urgency.
Gotcha. And by the way, anybody that needs to drop out, you can. We're in overtime now. We usually go for an hour at 6:05 p.m. And so to respect your time, anybody that needs to drop out, you can do that. But I'm going to keep going because this is an amazing panel that we have here. So Amy, do you have predictions on the next bull run, when it's going to start and where it's going to cap out at?
Again, I think, excuse me, I think it can be dangerous, or let's say a little bit reckless and irresponsible, when you've got lots of people who potentially aren't down the rabbit hole far enough to make predictions, because then you're just encouraging people to look at Bitcoin in dollar terms. And I think there's going to come a time in the future where your children, your grandchildren will need it as money. However, that said, I would agree with everything HODL says. I think 15 to 20x, maybe it's just my limiting beliefs that think that's huge. But I think when you look at the sheer amount of wealth and capital in these institutional markets and do the maths, you start to see how even if they're a conservative allocation, and I didn't even understand all this terminology a couple of years ago, but when you're looking at the billions and trillions of money that is tied up in these institutions. It's like, even if they're very conservative and say we're going to allocate 3 to 5% for our clients, it's unfathomable amounts of capital that would do what HODL's saying. I think the ETF is huge, and the skeptic in me now just assumes that there's a lot of strategic, intentional engineering going on behind the scenes, because the number of people in positions at the Fed who end up working at the SEC, who these, they serve themselves. So the skeptic in me is like, it will be a strategic timing of a few things. The ETF, turning the money printer back on to make sure that the money that's printed can go somewhere that's set up, ready to go to serve the people closest to it. So I think HODL's probably where I would sit. I think once we break 100,000, that's a 6-figure level that psychologically it won't take much to go from 100 to 200, because once you're over that 6-figure mark, I just think,
yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing about Bitcoin that a lot of people don't understand, is that Bitcoin can move fast, and like most of the gains are in like a 1 or 2 week time frame a lot of times, right? Where it'll just be going, it'll go up, and then it'll just go crazy, right? And so once the FOMO starts, it can get pretty bizarre really fast.
It's like what you said, Craig, before about your friend who it's too early. Oh, sorry, it's too late. It's too late. It's too late. Listen to The Psychology of Money, the book. It's just human behavior. People will think, oh, it's too late. Oh, it's too late. It's like, if you go and learn what Bitcoin actually is, and you do the kind of logical maths that HODL has done, it is early. and stop pricing the whole thing only in dollars.
We have a question. Can you discuss a possibility of quantum computer affecting Bitcoin? I do have on my Bitcoin page, if you go to that, CraigShipp.com/Bitcoin, there is a video by Jimmy Song where he talks about that, and it's really nothing to worry about. Because even if they get to the point where they have computers that are theoretically powerful enough to attack the Bitcoin network, 51% attack, they'll be able to, there are ways they'll be able to deal with that attack vector. So it's something that is a ways off anyway. And also the harm that a bad actor could do with a computer like that, there's a lot of other things that would probably be targets before Bitcoin anyway that we'd have to worry about. It's just like people say, if the internet goes down, what do you do, right? Well, if the internet goes down, there's going to be like Mad Max, right, in the street. It's not going to, the last thing you're going to be worried about is your Bitcoin. Lost Spring Bar says, are you guys talking about watches yet? Yes, we talked about watches in the beginning of the show. You should have tuned in the beginning. Brianna's wearing a gold. That's a stunning gold, 18 karat gold timepiece, Grand Seiko. And hers,
what's the strap? It looks like
here, let's go full screen on you, Bree. Hold on a second. Let me go full screen.
I mean, could you show some photos on your Flickr?
Yeah, but show that one closer.
What is that?
Okay,
strap that looks like a
snake. It is. It's shark, isn't it? What's your strap? Is it Stingray? Stingray.
Stingray.
It's a purple Stingray. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Purple Stingray.
There's like more photos, better photos on Flickr.
And hers is a perfect grab and go watch. Hers is quartz. So it's the 9F Grand Seiko quartz movement, which is an amazing movement. So yeah. All right, let's show for the watch guys. Let's show the watch that I'm going to get when Bitcoin hits. When Bitcoin hits $100,000. Okay.
Wow.
Let me see if I can show this. This is the gold GMT. I'll go to solo layout here. And these are Lost Spring Bar. He went and looked at one here locally that's in stock, not for sale right now, but it's a display item. And so the gold, the color balance, white balance, it's difficult to capture it, but you're going to see some other photos here that show it more true to color. But there's Lost Spring Bar went and looked at that. And the AD, who I bought one of my gold watches from 20 years ago, she said she's going to have one for me next November. She's going to have it ready for me when Bitcoin hits 100,000. So there you go.
It's a stunning watch. My
I
favorite Rolex before I sold all of mine was the GMT Master 2 root beer rose gold and steel.
Yeah, and this one, what's nice about this is it has the ceramic sleeves in the bracelet, so you're not going to get the bracelet stretch. See the date?
Wow.
They had that. They started that with the date 40, I think, and now they pretty much have it on all of them. So you're not going to get the bracelet stretch that happens over time with those solid gold Rolexes with this. So yeah, what I did, Eric, is I bought one extra Bitcoin when it was 16,000.
Okay.
Beginning of the year. So I bought we talked about it on the show here. I bought one extra Bitcoin and I earmarked it. I said, I'm going to hold that one until Bitcoin hits 100K. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to pay the capital gains tax. I'll have about 85,000 left. I'm going to take 38 grand and buy that watch. And I'm going to take another 25 grand and buy a mint Lexus LS 430 sedan, which I had one of those brand new. Here's, let me show you the picture. I had one of those back in 2002. I had an LS 430 that I bought new. And so those are fantastic cars. So I'm going to get one in mint condition with about maybe 25, 30,000 miles on it, something like that. So that's what I'm going to do with that one Bitcoin. So that's what you can do with Bitcoin, folks, is you can delay gratification. You can get the Bitcoin, hold it through a halving, hold it through a pump cycle, and then get what you need. Any final thoughts? Well, we got another comment talking about Michael Saylor. What is this comment? Is the Michael Saylor investment of over 100K Bitcoins already priced in? Is the ETF, if the ETF is approved, won't companies simply buy under the table from Michael Saylor's company as a result of price? Oh, I do want to talk about Michael Saylor because HODL, you talked about in one of your recent videos how once the ETF is approved, why would somebody need to buy MicroStrategy stock, that type of thing. Here's the thing about MicroStrategy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a leveraged play on Bitcoin. So you get more leverage with MicroStrategy because he borrowed so much to buy the extra Bitcoin. So theoretically, if Bitcoin goes up in price, you get more movement on MicroStrategy than you would with an ETF.
Sure, but the average retail person that's just looking at MicroStrategy like a de facto Bitcoin ETF will revert to the ETF because there's much less risk on the ETF than there is with MicroStrategy. With MicroStrategy, it's basically people are buying, like me, I bought MicroStrategy because of the Bitcoin and I got MicroStrategy's business for free, right? That it was the business was a bonus. So for people like me, it makes no sense to allow MicroStrategy to control the direction of my investment. Because let's say, for example, it's all going well and one of MicroStrategy's board members gets caught with their pants down doing something crazy. That's going to affect the price of MicroStrategy regardless of the Bitcoin that they hold. That's a layer 2 risk on top of the fact that I'm already using a wrapper in the first place.
Sure.
So you've got to layer down the risks, and from that scenario, the ETF will be a much better opportunity.
Gotcha.
And by the way, anyone who wants to generate leverage on a return on Bitcoin once the ETF is out, you can just buy a long-term call option on the ETF, and you'll get that same leverage that you get with MicroStrategy without the layers of risk.
Right.
Gotcha.
That makes sense.
The other thing that you could do is back when they were fudding the heck out of GBDC, I bought a bunch of it at $9 a share.
Yeah, me too.
Because everybody was fudding the heck out of that, right? And so I'm still holding that in my Roth IRA. And what's neat about a Roth IRA is all that gains are all tax-free. So I'm going to live off of the Roth when I finally stop working. And I won't have to touch any of my Bitcoin. That's all in cold storage. I'll be able to just live off my Roth IRA, and all of that money's tax-free. So both the gains in MicroStrategy, which I also have MicroStrategy in the Roth as well, all those gains are tax-free.
Yep.
So okay.
I got a question for you guys, for everybody
Mm-hmm.
in the group here. So in the UK, and I know that in Texas, there are companies that are starting to accept Bitcoin as commerce. I'm looking at doing
El Salvador, it's legal tender.
Right. I'm curious as to in the UK, how many areas? I mean, are you guys seeing it as legal tender also in the UK? I'm setting up one of my companies to start accepting Bitcoin as payment. Just curious if you guys are seeing anything.
Listen, Eric, as far as I'm concerned, I have the most controversial opinion out of any Bitcoiner on this topic. I think any Bitcoiner who is sending their Bitcoin to anyone to buy any piece of shit is a moron, because it is the hardest asset humanity has ever created. And you want to send it to someone for a piece of fucking art, you are an absolute moron. Spend the fiat that you've got,
Right.
send it over to them, stop being an idiot, and just get over with it. Right now, if you want to spend and replace, that's fine. But you're just mentally masturbating in that.
Sure.
I love, hey, HODL, I love your view on this, but here's the thing. This is another rule in Bitcoin. Bitcoin flows from the weak to the strong hands.
Sure.
Okay. This is how it works. Eric has a strong hand. If Eric has an event at his restaurant, a Bitcoin event, right, and people come, let's say he has a beef dinner, a beefsteak dinner, they call them, right? A lot of these Bitcoiner guys are what do you call it when you only eat meat?
Carnivores.
Okay, so let's say he has a carnivore dinner at his restaurant, right? And it says they can all pay in Bitcoin, and they all come and they pay him in Bitcoin. That's an example where Bitcoin flows from the weak to the strong hands. And if he can do that, if Eric can pull that off, hey, it's the way of the world.
I have a business where I tell people to pay me in Bitcoin. I'll give them a discount, and I openly tell them I'm doing this because the Bitcoin is going to be worth more than the dollars that you're going to give me today.
Sure.
So, and if you want to do that, that's up to you. I would never do that. I would never do that. But if you
be on the receiving end.
Well, I think we got 5 investors here, and but the idea is that, hey, I was just curious if I had understood that in Texas they're already starting to accept Bitcoin. Obviously, in El Salvador they're doing it, and their economy is booming.
Eric, the biggest misconception about El Salvador, which is a thing that I pointed out as soon as it happened, as soon as I read the law, is the fact that it's still on the U.S. dollar standard, right? The only difference is that Bitcoin is a form of tender. So what that means is that you can exchange in Bitcoin. However, it must be priced in US dollars. So it's not the Bitcoin that's the legal tender. It's the underlying. It's always the US dollar that's the legal tender. You can just transact. It's like saying, if I want to sell this lighter to you, right, and you want to give me something for this lighter, we're going to find out what the price of this lighter is in US dollars. And then we're going to find a fair exchange, and I'm going to give this to you, and you're going to give me whatever you're going to give me.
That's a beautiful lighter. Is that a DuPont? What is that lighter?
That is a DuPont. Yeah, it's a DuPont.
I'm looking for things on my desk that I could trade you. I have some sunblock.
There you go. Let's assume that sunblock is worth $4,000, right? And we could say that I'm going to trade you this, but again, we've put a price of $4,000 US dollars on it. That's the biggest misconception with what's going on with El Salvador. It is not a Bitcoin standard. Bitcoin is a form of legal tender, but the U.S. dollar is still the underlying currency. But
Bukele took a lot of steps to encourage businesses to accept Bitcoin, and he's helping them along the way. Here's the thing about accepting Bitcoin is if it can give you a competitive advantage. And here's the thing about these people that go to these dinners and things like that. A lot of them were early Bitcoin adopters, and they've got a lot of Bitcoin. And the thing they don't want to do is they don't want to pay capital gains tax. They don't want to cash out some of that Bitcoin and pay the capital gains tax. They would much rather go to a party and spend it where nobody's going to say anything, right? They went to the Miami Bitcoin conference, and they were buying Rolexes there. There was a gray market dealer there that was selling a bunch of Rolexes. And they're going in there with Bitcoin and buying the freaking Rolex because they can do it. Now, technically, they were supposed to report that transaction and pay the capital gains anyway. But practically, do they do it? No, they just get the watch.
Well,
right? So there,
the problem with that is that that's a very short-sighted way of looking at it, because while they're doing it, and I agree with you, but you and I both know that the long arm of the government figures this out in the future, and now you've got AI. So if anyone thinks they're not going to set an AI analysis tool on the blockchain network to figure out what the hell's happened at some point, if not already, you're living in a dream world. Like there
they
is
better
no.
go and live in. They better go live in Dubai or El Salvador. Is
Unfortunately,
what
with
they
an
better do.
American passport, you're screwed anywhere, right? Because you pay tax based on the ownership of the passport. Whereas for
Sure.
me, I
Yeah,
pay tax based on my residency in the UK. So
yeah.
yeah. The tax thing, I don't think it's worth playing with. Pay your taxes. Don't be stupid. Figure out how you can
Sure.
optimize under the
Yeah.
law and just figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, I'm not looking at ways to subvert or bypass that. I'm looking at ways for people to be able that are in maybe not in our situation where we're buying and holding. They're maybe a little bit later in life. Maybe they don't have people that they're going to be handing off their Bitcoin to, and they want to spend it. So.
Lost
Take
Spring
it.
Bar has a question. Craig, have you heard from Steve about the Little Treasury event? Bree are coming back to Maryland for the Little Treasury event. I don't know if Brianna's coming to the event. I'm probably going to be at the event, and he will hopefully be on the show next week to talk about it. This is a big event that Steve at Little Treasury Jewelers has once a year. So yeah, we'll be
When
talking about it. It'll be in
when
October.
is okay?
I think it's around the first or second week of October. So, so yeah. All right. Well, I think we have done a lot of, we've gotten a lot of education in. This has been a pretty signal rich show, I think. What else should we cover that we haven't covered, HODL?
I think every single person here needs to get to one Bitcoin as fast as possible. Anyone who's listening, get to one Bitcoin as fast as possible. Stop fucking around and understand there are people richer than you figuring this out. That's what I had to come to realize. There were people richer than me figuring this out. So I had to figure it out. So you need to figure it out, get to one Bitcoin, you know, follow the 3 rules of Bitcoin, which, as I say, is step number 1, buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy. And then, ultimately, you gotta just hodl. Like the hardest thing people have, in my experience, of watching people in business over the last 17, 18 years, is they just have trouble sitting on their hands when it comes to good value assets. And so for me, one of the strategies of doing that is smoking great cigars, right? And traveling, right? So figure that out. Find out what it is for you that can allow you to sit on your hands.
I have to laugh. Here's Lost Spring Bar put a comment in. I sold my Bitcoin at the bottom. He's not joking. He didn't quite hit the bottom. He was close. He sold it around 16,000, I think. Get this. We were talking live on a show. No, actually, we were in another app. But anyway, we were talking live, and he was selling his Bitcoin, right? And he had a pretty good stack. And he was selling his Bitcoin because he was convinced it was going below $10,000. It's going below 10,000. I'm going to buy it back. He's still waiting for the 10,000, folks. So there's a lesson to learn: is you try to time the market with Bitcoin, and you can get your what handed to you.
You had somebody put up there. What's the price of Bitcoin on the exchange right now? It's at 25,925.
There you go. That's the fair market price right now. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is it is trading 24/7, 365 around the world, and it's got a value. It's got a market value. It's pretty liquid. You can even sell a pretty good chunk of it without a lot of slippage. It can also be sold over the counter without slippage.
The
So there's a lot
thing,
of
Craig? Bitcoin has been trading longer than the U.S. stock market.
Oh, because it's been 24/7.
Because it's a 24/7 trade.
Wow.
Yeah, and here's somebody
Good
says,
statistic.
how do I know 16K is the bottom? We don't know.
We don't know.
It could go back down to 10. It could go down to $10,000.
Yeah. And how much is
don't try this at home.
Right? And how much is your dollar worth? How much is your dollar worth? How much is your $100 bill worth? It's kind of interesting.
Zero. It's like zero now.
And Craig, the one thing that I ran into after starting to buy up my stacking up is that when I try to explain it to people, I realize that one of the things that people don't understand, it's almost like a paradigm shift when you say orange pilled. It really is an orange pill, because you start to realize, you know what, $1 is nothing more than a piece of paper that we've agreed upon that has a intrinsic value. And everybody says, well, it's backed by, and then they start to say gold, or it's backed. And I said, no, Nixon stopped that in 1971. You know, well, it's just an agreed upon, an agreed upon value. So yeah.
It's
it'll
backed
be
by people's trust in government, which
Well,
is
and-
very
There you go.
quickly breaking.
And the problem is the government, the United States government, has a real problem on their hands. Okay,
Yeah.
they've got a huge debt. The interest rates are higher. They can't pay off that debt. There's no answer. I mean, really smart people have looked at this situation and they don't think we can grow out of this. Now, I saw a tweet the other day. I think Pomp was saying that he thinks that it is possible we could grow out of it if we did the right things, but that's a big if. We have no way of knowing how many dollars are going to be created and how much it's going to be debased. We just don't know that. We do know with Bitcoin, it is not going to be debased. And that's the situation that we're in. And also, Bitcoin is better technologically. It can move around the world better than the dollar can. Okay, its network is superior to the U.S. dollar's network, right? The network for the U.S. dollar is archaic. All right, so it's technology that's superior.
And math.
It's
Technology
it's-
and math.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, and when you've got somebody like Michael Saylor, who is a freaking rocket scientist, who studied this thing up one side and down the other before he put, $500 million into it, and you got him saying that this is the real deal, I'm not going to second guess that guy. That was when I started getting really confident, was when he jumped in,
Yeah.
because I'm like, man, all these years I've been waiting for guys like him to come in and go public about it. Because I
Right.
remember when there was almost nobody on YouTube. There was Adam Meister, there was that guy Antonopoulos, okay,
Max Kaiser.
Max Kaiser. There were very few people talking about Bitcoin back in the day, and you almost never saw it on the news, ever. I mean, now it's people are talking about it all over the freaking place. So this thing's for real. We just got to keep educating people, and that's what HODL's all about. Subscribe to his channel, for God's sakes. Bitcoin HODL. It's not difficult, folks. Type in Bitcoin HODL into
British HODL.
YouTube.
British.
British HODL. British. It is difficult.
It's not difficult.
British HODL.
It's
I've had the freaking ticker down there, guys. British HODL. Type into I was testing you, British, to see if you were listening. Okay.
The craziest thing about this is you said, you got confident when Michael Saylor jumped into it, and that's after years of you already understanding it. Now imagine
Yes.
you're a family office that's controlling $10 billion. Michael Saylor's in it. You've got a couple guys researching it, and now the phone rings and it's Larry Fink, and Larry Fink says you better get into this asset because it's now ESG friendly.
Yeah.
I'm subscribing right now. Subscribing.
We've been talking about the herd is coming for a long time, and now the herd is coming. Okay, they are coming. They take time. These guys measure 7 times and cut once, right? But they are coming, and the window of opportunity for front running them is closing rapidly. So,
well, I think that the advice that you gave me, you said when I started putting money into this, you were like, just sit down, shut up, and hold on, because you don't know. And what was the question? How do you know it's not going to hit 16K? Sure, everybody's sitting here. We're all going to wait. Hey, if it drops, we're going to buy more. If it raises, we're still going to invest. It's still going to be. If something's going to go to $100,000, how many of that something do I want? And that's the question. It's like, oh, well, it's too late. I think Amy was, referring to what you were talking about earlier is like, oh, it's too late. It's too late. It's too late. Even if the thing hits $100,000, it's still not too late, because it's going to continue to escalate in value. And that's where it's like, just continue to buy. It's an ongoing thing.
it's probably less than 1% of people worldwide own Bitcoin. So we've got 99% to go.
I think the
It's not,
question to
it's,
ask as well is what's the alternative?
there isn't
Yeah,
one. That's a
Like,
very
yeah.
good point.
like what?
That's a,
Fine, keep doing what you're doing and keep getting further and further behind. Like no one knows if Bitcoin's the answer. No one knows if it's perfect. No one knows what the price is
No.
going to do. But beyond the price, it's the only option we've got to fix
Michael
a
Saylor
massive
talked
global
about that.
problem.
Yes, he talked about that when he talked about putting their treasury in Bitcoin. He said we looked at art, we looked at real estate, we looked at all kinds of ways to protect this melting ice cube, is how he described it, right? And he came up with Bitcoin. He looked at all the options. Okay, he's talked about this. And so again, if he felt this was the best option to store his money to keep it from being a melting ice cube, then I'm not going to second guess that.
Right.
So,
And that's not a
all right,
corporate problem. That's not, when you keep referencing Michael Saylor, people either might not know who he is or just think, he's the CEO/founder of this giant corporation. This
yep,
doesn't affect me. Everything he says and everything he's doing needs to be applied
applies
at the
to everybody.
individual level. Yeah.
It applies to anybody that wants to store value. It's as simple as that.
That's a good question.
So HODL has talked about this on his channel a lot. So check out British HODL, check out his videos. He'll tell you about when you should, matter of fact, he did one recently in the last day or so, talking about when you should borrow against your Bitcoin and how you should do that and so on and so forth. So watch his video. If you're not already subscribed, go over to YouTube, British HODL, and he's got a detailed video on that subject.
Just be very careful. Sorry, I have to say something. Just be very careful and do your due diligence about how you go about that.
Surprising to hear Bitcoin maxis talking about how valuable it is will be in U.S. dollars so much. So here's the thing,
like $1,000 net worther, as I call them.
Here's the thing, Law Spring Bar. He's the one that sold at 16,000. He's a little bitter, but give him a break. But here's the thing, Law Spring Bar. Really, what we should refer to as purchasing power. And by the way, I'm not a Bitcoin maxi. I own other things too, so I don't qualify as a maxi. And the maxis attack me a lot, so there's that. But anyway, here's the thing: purchasing power is what's important. And so that's why I use that. I said that one Bitcoin is going to buy me that Rolex watch and the mint condition Lexus. So that's the purchasing power we're looking at, right?
Sure.
Is what can you get down the road that's of real value to you that you otherwise might not be able to get if you didn't store your wealth in something that actually holds that wealth properly and holds it through time. Okay. So, all right. I think we've had a great show. What do you guys think? Anything else? Are we all in, all done?
Listen,
I think you could talk about this for hours. I mean, I could sit here and pick your all's brains for hours about this. This is the most interesting conversation I've had in the past week.
Who's game for a show next Friday? Same bat time, same bat channel. Who's in for a show? Who's down?
Sounds good to me.
I need to confirm, but it should be okay.
You need to confirm, Bree?
I'll need to have a look.
Bree Fit Dance?
I can. Yeah, I can.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah, let me check my schedule. I'm available.
All right. Well, anyway, I'll do it. I'm gonna try to do shows every Friday at 5 just to be consistent. I got out of the consistency there for a while, but I'm going to try to start getting back into it every Friday at 5. You guys are always welcome. Even if you don't have an invite, just come in the chat. I'll give you the link to pop in. It's easy, as you know, to pop in and say hi and mix it up. And I think this is going to help people because here's the thing. My channel, a lot of people on this channel are not Bitcoiners, okay? So we're reaching a whole different audience. And I think that's what's important is reaching. We preach to the choir a lot on Bitcoin Twitter. We need to reach people that are not on Bitcoin Twitter.
So real quick, Craig, HODL, you're on your all's page on your YouTube. Do you walk people through from basically from in the gate to getting up and running? Do you have videos on that, like how to get set up on Swan? Because we ran into some things, and Craig and I hit a lot of hurdles because of the way that my companies. Yeah, a lot of resistance because of the way my companies are set up, and some of my companies. Well, I started buying through was going to buy through one of my businesses, and the way that it's, they want to look at your name has to match up on the account and things like that, and
all this other stuff.
Right. And when I went to one of the Coinbase, my Coinbase is still locked up. So I haven't been buying on Coinbase, even though because I haven't been able to get the customer support to get things squared away.
Yeah. So if you have any complicated structure like that just isn't you, or you as the title owner on the company, the best thing that you want to do, because if that's what you're doing, you're typically going to qualify for the high net worth services of any exchange. So just get in touch with them, say that you want to make a purchase of more than $50,000 to $100,000, and they'll walk you through it one-on-one.
That's what he ended up with Swan Private, and so Swan's taking care of him, and that
you're in good hands.
But the reason, it doesn't really help to do a how-to video on that because everybody's situation is different. Right. I do have a lot of videos on my Bitcoin channel about the general things and all that, but there is more and more resistance. And again, that's why get your Bitcoin and get it in cold storage as soon as possible, because your bank might at some point say, we won't even transfer money to exchanges. And then you're hunting for another bank, right?
That's happening, that's happening in the UK right now, by the way.
Exactly. Really? Exactly. So you just do what you can do and, work through it. But yes,
I think BTC Sessions is a great resource for tutorials. He's awesome.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Eric, if you go to any of my videos, what I did was I recorded a training called the $5 Million Bitcoin. And it's basically the exact training and logical thought process that I took my parents through when I sat down and convinced them to buy one Bitcoin for every property that they own. And it's free. You can, if you look under any of my videos, there's a link to it. You can go and check it out, and it's all there. It takes you through from not understanding what Bitcoin is right up until cold storage.
Very good.
Yep. Exciting times ahead, folks. And I'm wearing the Panama hat.
You have to keep your passphrase secure somewhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Bree even has her Bitcoin secured by a Trezor.
Yeah, you have to be really careful with the words. You have to know where they are. You gotta make a note of it. You gotta be careful.
Yeah, I use a multi-jurisdictional custody solution. So in the States, it's obviously a little bit different. But if I was an American, what I would do is make sure that I had, a multi-signature wallet. I use a service called Casa. I don't know whether you've heard of that or not, but that's you pay a flat fee on a yearly basis. They manage everything. The fee is basically to make sure that someone's on the end of the line when you need them, and they've got really great service. So, I for example in the UK, I got to fly to 3 different countries because my keys are in 3 different countries. For an American, what I would do is make sure that if you're in Texas, for example, and you've got 3 keys on that wallet, 1 key is in Texas, 1 key is in Florida, 1 key is in California. And you might say, why California, right? But you want that jurisdictional arbitrage between where the keys are. So, for example, if one of my keys is in Dubai, and by the way, none of my keys are in any of the countries that I'm going to mention. If one of my keys is in Dubai, and another
let me write this down, British.
Another one of my keys is in Monaco, for example. If anyone wants to try and attack that, they need to now deal with 2 different jurisdictions, right? So it would be the same thing in the US, for example. If you have a Wyoming LLC and the share certificates of that Wyoming LLC are held within a safe deposit box within Wyoming, it is considered a Wyoming present company, which means now you got to go sue that company in Wyoming. So there's all these little things that you can do in the US to create jurisdictional arbitrage. And if you're living in a red state, it's probably good to have one of your keys in a blue state. And if you're living in a blue state, it's probably good to have one of your keys in a red state. So just think like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Amy has to pop out. Thanks for coming in, Amy.
You're welcome. I was just going to say the other company that's very reputable for that is Unchained. Really good option for people. But yeah, I think the first step is buying it, even if it's with a custodial exchange, a Bitcoin only custodial exchange like Swan or Amber is another one.
What do we
Next
do
step,
with Swan now that Ripple owns their custodian?
don't know, can't comment on that.
You put your Bitcoin in self custody is what you do. So here's the
Yeah, that's the
problem,
next
though.
step.
Here's the problem that you're going to run into. See, I was out on the Chesapeake Bay. It can get choppy sometimes, right? And I was showing somebody my Trezor, and I said I was bragging about how secure my Bitcoin was, and so when we hit some chop, and that thing went flying, and my 24 words, the whole thing, everything went overboard, and I lost all
You
my
had a
Bitcoin.
boating accident.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
really?
it happens. It's really bad when that happens, but it's just a thing. So be careful when you're out there on the boat.
It'd be amazing in 30 years when that Bitcoin that's lost at the bottom of the ocean suddenly starts moving.
And I'll be at an undisclosed location.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right. Well, thank you guys and gals for coming on. It's been fun. And again,
Thank you.
we've got on the ticker down below. I didn't put your information on the ticker because I didn't want to dox you, Eric. I wasn't going to tell anybody where
No
you
problem.
are or who you are because I don't want them coming after your Bitcoin.
No problem.
So I didn't. I just told them you were a client. I didn't say what business, anything like
There you
that.
go.
So I think, which is good. We don't want to do that. We don't want to dox you.
Anonymous.
Anonymous, yeah, that's
Yeah.
me.
And somebody did ask about the blockchain and being able to be traced and all that. There are ways to make your Bitcoin a little more private, and especially like if you're using the Lightning Network, there are ways to do that. So yeah, it's the Bitcoin thing is a whole rabbit hole. The privacy thing, everything is all, you can study this stuff up one side and down the other, but go to CraigShipp.com/Bitcoin. There's a whole bunch of information on all of the above. Thanks again for everybody for coming on, and
Thank you.
again, follow them. You've been seeing their information on the ticker the whole time, and we'll do this again, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll see who shows up. Thanks again for coming in, everybody.
Pleasure, everyone. Thank you. Have a
Thank
good evening.
you.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank you very
everyone.
much.